Welcome. Good morning. Thank you. Thank you very much for coming. Welcome to the first DConf ever. Okay, so I'm Fabio. Hey, this is weird. Very awkward. Okay, so let's just pretend that we're in Europe, something like that. Okay. Let me go back a little bit, talk how this confusion all began. So my name is Fabio Akita, and I've been working in the industry for a very long time now, like more years than it's worth actually counting. It goes back to 2006 when I was in the SAP industry. I was at the top of my game back then doing enterprise Java. And then this happened, this shit happened. And when this happened, I knew I had to have more of that. Not only to use different tools that I was used to use, but to be part of a different community as well. So when I saw this video, I decided I had to learn this, I had to have more of this, and I was at a turning point in my career where I was about to accept a position as senior management of a big traditional company in Brazil. And I decided to decline the offer and try the most risky thing that I could do back then, which was doing Ruby on Rails in 2007. I jumped to be a freelancer in a consultancy for a Utah company. And then I was making a third of what I was making in the SAP industry. There was no Ruby, there was no agile movement here in Brazil. So either I would move to the USA or I should just forget that stuff like that existed and conform. But I didn't like those options, so I tried to create my own option, and it started with this company. Then after I struggled a lot learning the new tools, the new dealing with US clients, then when I had a stable team, a very good team by the way, I decided to jump to the next opportunity that was at local web. And there I struggled even more because there I was at a tech company that was still trying to learn all this new stuff. There were people there doing classic SAP for like 10 years. And there I was, the Rails hipster trying to change everything. And at the same time, I had to organize many events. It was my first time organizing events, so Rails Summit 2008, 2009. Those were very difficult years. And I don't want to bore you with details of my LinkedIn profile, but the point here is just to showcase that my behavior is like, when I want to see something change it, I usually go and try to change it. Once I do, I move on to the next thing, and this is what I have been doing the past 25 years. I never settle. Every time I feel like I'm in a comfortable position, then I feel very, very anxious. And speaking of being anxious, I see that most people have difficulties with a very simple dilemma that hunts them for the rest of their career. So in one hand, most people would want to have a stable career, the so-called predictable life, but one that you believe, for example, that you can foster a family and have a stable income, buy your stuff. On the other hand, the longer this stability, so-called stability stands, the more anxious you become. So how long will this stability last? Will my company retain me for like the next 10 years? Will the stack that I'm using now become obsolete in the next 5 years? So then what? What should I do? So you become very anxious. And oddly enough, I found the best metaphor on how to deal with this anxiousness, and it comes from Netflix. Maybe if you're in the infrastructure field, you probably heard about that. Netflix has this thing they call the chaos monkey. It is part of, it's a piece in a set of strategies they call the Simian Army. And the whole idea is that instead of waiting for the next infrastructure crash, they randomly crash themselves all the time. So randomly crashing a system and see what happens, if they can recover or not. So I think this is a very, very clever idea. So the metaphor here is that I chaos monkey myself every once in a while. So that's what I do. Shake things up, and it's too stable, it's too nice, so let's crash something and see how it goes. So this is the pivotal point. For example, last year when I decided to get out of Rubyconf Brazil that I've been doing for like 9 years and starting something new. So this is one such example. Once upon a time, Brazil didn't have enough tech events, but nowadays we have like a lot. Most of them concentrated in big cities. This slide is just a small example, a small sample, and if we add the frequent meetups that people have everywhere, so the options are endless. And it's great that we have so many options. It's almost impossible to attend them all, and they are doing a phenomenal job. So you have events for like everything, every new technology, every new field of expertise, for entrepreneurs, for designers, for people that really like the enterprise stuff. There are events for that as well, so it's good that we don't have to cover it. So there are a lot of events covering many things. So then I was thinking, what a new event could possibly offer that all of those are not offering already. And I've been frequently traveling all over the country to distant places. For example, I just came back from Macapá, way north. In a couple of weeks, I'm going way south to Criciúma. Then I believe in a month or something, I'll probably go to Rondônia and find out if Acre really exists. And whenever I go to distant places relative to São Paulo, I'm usually appalled by the perspectives that people have in those places. So they have a lot of problems. So for example, when I was in Macapá, there was a region that was without internet for like 2 days. Thank you, Anatel. And while I'm talking here, I usually remember those people from distant places that have many problems. And some of the reasons for those problems that their local industry has few options. So here I am, a student in college doing computer science or whatever. And because of the public sector, the industry is usually tiny. Some of the talents end up in the public sector. The small private companies usually exist to serve those public institutions, so it's a very negative cycle. This ends up stifling the whole industry, and the public sector has few reasons to really innovate. And the students out of college, they have few options unless they like move to a big city nearby. They go to Recife or some other city, São Paulo, Rio. But again, as I said before, those are not the only options. You can always make a third option. The world doesn't have enough good programmers. I've been repeating that a lot in the last couple of years. So there are big companies, not only small tech startups, but there are big companies outside, overseas, that are hiring like crazy. They can't find enough good programmers to hire. So they hire from everywhere, So this renders geography almost irrelevant. It doesn't matter where you live, just how good you are. And to be good, it doesn't require also fancy degrees. So our professional has the advantage that one good self-learner is indistinguishable from someone from an average overseas college. If only Brazilians got used to speak more English. So if you follow me, you know that I've been doing a lot of droning lately, flying around, and last week I was at Paulista Avenue doing some of my stunts there. So follow me. And I decided to visit the one place that I always like it. It was at the FNAC bookstore. Out of curiosity, I stopped by the computer section, and this is what I found. So once upon a time, anyone learning about computers and programming could rely on that section in any good bookstore in the city. Nowadays, even the dictionary section has more options. So, this reflects a reality that there are fewer books because demand for translated books in paper decreased dramatically. So good developers are already learning online here in Brazil as well. They not only read digital books, but also watch dozens of hours of tech talks and screencasts from many websites and events. And people abroad do the same, but it strikes me that almost no gringo searches for Brazilian tech talks. Now, why is that? So a couple of days ago, I was recording a new episode for a podcast called Ruby Rogues, and I asked two of my fellow Rubies that were hosting the show to answer me when was the last time they specifically searched for a Brazilian speaker talking about anything. So these are the answers.
Hey, Fabio. I can honestly say that I've never looked for a Brazilian speaker online, primarily because I don't know Portuguese. If it were in English, I would probably look it up and give it a shot.
I have never searched for a Brazilian presentation, tech talk online. I wish I spoke Portuguese. It's a very beautiful language, but I've never been able to really understand or find value personally in searching for that yet. I hope to.
Okay, so you could watch this and just answer, meh, well, we don't need those damn imperialist Americans to understand us, screw them, right? And I understand the feeling. It feels like whenever we're speaking in English that we are bowing to the imperialists. It feels patriotic to renounce doing their ways. But then again, who are we fooling? We are already Americanized. We buy MacBooks, we eat McDonald's, we ride Uber, we listen to their songs, we consume everything they have. So what's the point? The Chinese, the Russians, the Indians, they all understood it that by using the same weapons, you become more robust in the global market. So it's not less patriotic, it's actually more patriotic that we use the same weapons if we can. And in the past 10 years, I've been doing a lot of talks. So I did like 200 talks in the last 10 years, average of 20, 30 per year. Mostly in Brazil. I was fortunate to go speak in Baltimore, New York, Amsterdam, Moscow, Tel Aviv, Tokyo. And obviously, while I was in the United States, I was presenting in English, but it was also English that I used in cities like Amsterdam or Tel Aviv. So it was not an alien thing to see local people speaking in English and presenting their own talks in English in Amsterdam. They were not using whatever language they use there, I don't know. And if you think about it, for example, an Israeli doesn't feel awkward to speak in English to another Israeli fellow. Now, let me ask you this. Who feels the most awkward listening to Brazilians speaking in English?
My equipe play very nice. The first time Iraq and Saudi Africa play same, but the second time I have to control the match. Control the match, my equipe play in the left, the right, in the middle, have one best opportunity for score. Iraq mark the middle from behind. After the second time I make two changes. One player experienced, teve mais chego, e another player que have experience, que play very good, Steve Pinar, but I don't beat the goal.
Muito bem.
Cadê o Gustavo Werther?
Está traduzindo.
Para traduzir, porque isso aí...
Então vamos fazer o seguinte, eu traduzo, então vamos mostrar.
Okay, so of course, this is the most extreme example, and it's worst of all, the one we usually think about when we try to imagine how a Brazilian would speak in English. We usually think about Joel Santana. So other Brazilians feel ashamed about other Brazilians because our instinctive reaction is, look how bad this guy is making us look to the gringos. So they dislike the imperialists, but they care a lot how we look like to them, or he's going to the other way. So he's a sellout to the imperialists. Shame on him. Oops. So I have another clip from another YouTube channel called Small Advantages. I highly recommend you watch that. It's by a North American called Gavin, who learned to speak Portuguese on his own and regularly posts to the Brazilian audience, trying to teach them how to speak English, how Americans behave. And he recorded some of his friends watching João Santana speaking and then commenting out on his performance and giving a rating of how they think about João Santana speaking. So let's just watch it. It's enlightening.
4 to 5.
Attempting the best. I'd say 3 or 4.
I mean, I think I would say probably an 8 as far as what he speaks, but I mean, as far as my comprehension of how he speaks English, I would give him a 2.
His English is better than the other language that I speak, which is none. So I'd say he's doing a better job than I can in his language.
Well, he did way better speaking in English than he would have gotten me speaking in Portuguese. So, I mean, I would give him a 6, I guess. Just he had definitely the right words from when I could hear it, but they were just kind of dispersed, misplaced.
I mean, it's hard for me to give a number because it's not based on, like, his English might be good, but where does he live? Like, what's his accent? Do the people that also speak English have that thick of an accent and understand him easily? So for me, I don't understand him that well. I would say, like, a 3?
Opa, e pra finalizar, sou eu, o apresentador, o Gavin, para falar sobre o que eu pensei. Na verdade, gente, eu interajo muito com brasileiros e normalmente eu vejo exatamente o oposto do João Santana. Eu vejo brasileiros que têm um conhecimento super profundo do inglês, mas eles nem falam, nem se sentem confortáveis quando falar inglês. Então, por causa disso, eles permanecem completamente quietos, sem falar nada. Que isso, gente? Por causa disso, como muitos dos meus amigos já mencionaram, mesmo se o inglês do João Santana não fosse tão perfeito, ele ainda tentou falar em inglês. E através de tentar várias vezes, você vai gradualmente pegar mais do sotaque. E claro que uma coisinha que a gente aprendeu durante o vídeo também é que o sotaque, a pronúncia em inglês é muito, muito importante de treinar. Não é somente a gramática, né? É importante, você tem que ser entendido. Mas afinal de contas, o importante é que ele tentou se comunicar. E é exatamente isso que vocês vão ter que fazer também. Parabéns ao Joel, parabéns a vocês. You rock!
And it sounds like an exaggeration, I know, when I say that most foreigners are way less critical of other people's accents. So Brazilians, even those who never attempted to speak in public, heavily criticize other Brazilians. So shame on all of them. To the point that it makes us feel intimidated to even try. So coming up here and speaking in English to a Brazilian audience feels awkward. So I'm warning the other speakers already, you will feel awkward here because it's not our way. So this is the wall that we are trying to break down right now. So it's so weird that an event like this feels strange to even exist. So, and this is what we want to change. It always feels like we are the underdogs. So Brazilians picture themselves being the underdogs in everything. So Brazil sucks, Brazilians suck, everything we do sucks. So forever, without future, without hope, because we are alone in some distant God-forsaken place on earth, no good local companies to go work for, no good opportunities, and we keep feeling like there is nothing that we can do, and I don't think so. So remember when I was showing this map with the places that I spoke, remember I mentioned Tel Aviv. It was a phenomenal place with phenomenal people, and I have never been so impressed by any place. I really want to go back there in the future. And just as a curiosity, I was staying in a small hotel downtown, that Vital Hotel, I believe, near a shopping center. And the interesting thing is that a couple of days after I left, in that other place here, a few blocks away, there was a bomb explosion, so that happens. So a bomb exploded right next to my hotel a couple of days later, November 21st, 2012. And I'm not one to judge why they do that, but anyways, it's a war zone, incidents like that happen. And I wonder how a small group of people, the Israeli, looking back into history, against all odds, they set root in an inhospitable desert, and they thrived, and they have been living in this war zone forever. And if you look to innovation, after Silicon Valley, you have to have your radar focused on Israel. So for example, in 2012, the Waze app that we use for traffic is another Israeli tech. And I first knew about that in 2012. All of my friends were using that already. So when I came back, I was starting using Waze because I learned about that in Israel. And Israelis are not the kind of people that procrastinate, so they don't feel sorry for their sad condition, like whining all the time and posting nasty Twitter things, thinking that they're helping someone doing that. They dare. That's what they call chutzpah, I believe. I don't know, that's the way they say it. There's no direct translation. And I believe that we can use some of that chutzpah in our favor. So that reminded me about a book I was reading a couple days ago, Malcolm Gladwell. I like to read his books. He's a good storyteller. And this book starts with a very compelling underdog tale. So it's a story of something that supposedly happened like 3,000 years ago when the kingdom of Israel was in its infancy. There's a place there called the Shephelah in what is now Israel. So this is the deal. This region here has a lot of mountains and a lot of valleys. So the Philistines, they move it along the southern ridge from the coastal plain. Then King Saul, moved his arm along the northern ridge. The goal was the conquest of Bethlehem. So both armies got very close, but then they stopped. So they end up in a deadlock situation up a mountain, each of them. Neither wanted to advance further down the valley and up in the other mountain because it would become an easy target. So to break the deadlock, there was this tradition they have there. So the Philistines send their mightiest warrior down into the valley floor, and he calls out and says to the Israelites, send your mightiest warrior down and we'll have this out, just the two of us. So King Saul finds himself without a volunteer. No surprises here. Only one person comes forward, a young shepherd boy, having no other option. So the king sends the boy. He tries to give him his armor. The boy says, no, I don't use armor. And okay, he's a crazy guy. So instead of getting an armor, the boy picks up nothing but some stones from the ground. He goes down the mountainside to face the giant. The giant sees him approaching and calls out, come to me so I can feed your flesh to the birds of the heaven and the beasts of the field. And the shepherd gets closer and closer. The giant sees that he's carrying a staff. He feels insulted and says, am I a dog that you would come to me with sticks? And the shepherd boy takes one of his stones out of his pocket, puts it in his sling, rolls it around, and lets it fly. And he hits the giant right between the eyes, his most vulnerable spot, and he falls down dead or unconscious. And the boy runs up and takes his sword and cuts his head off. And the Philistines see this, and they just turn and run. So, and of course, the name of the giant is Goliath, and the name of the shepherd boy is David. And Malcolm Gladwell, the author, says that everything we think we know about that story is wrong. So, David in that story is supposed to be the underdog. That's why we like the story, right? So now why do we call David an underdog? because he's just a little boy against Goliath, that's a strong, big giant, an experienced warrior against a shepherd seems unfair. Most importantly, Goliath has all this modern weaponry, fully equipped, and all David has is his sling. So now let's Sherlock the hell out of this shit. So David is carrying not a slingshot. It's not like this. It's not a child's toy. This is a serious weapon. So how serious, you ask? So better show you. Okay, so let me summarize. Rocks in the valley of Elah aren't normal. It's barium sulfate, twice the density of normal stone. So shoot one of those with a sling and you get the stopping power of a Magnum 45 caliber. And slingers, experienced slingers, they are precise to the distance of 200 yards. So everybody, Goliath, King Saul, the armies, they were expecting a hand-to-hand, close-quarters combat. David is not stupid. He never gets this close. He knows what he's doing. Goliath is just a fucking sitting duck. He has no chance. And speaking of Goliath, there have been a lot of research, serious research in the medical community. Lots of papers actually published about the behavior, the strange behavior of Goliath. And in summary, the symptoms suggest that perhaps he has giantism. He is head and shoulders larger than anyone. Whenever you see a human like that, it's usually giantism, specifically acromegaly. It's a tumor which causes the pituitary gland to overproduce growth hormone. This is why he moves so slow in the story. And worse, acromegaly affects vision. That's why he has an attendant that has to lead him to the battlefield, and that's why he shouts, "Come to me," because I obviously can't go to you because I can't see you. And that's why he also feels insulted when David said that he has a stick, actually sticks, because he's seen duplicated in his vision. So his vision sucks. So the Israeli army thought they were looking at a formidable foe, but Goliath is actually just a slow giant with bad vision. And the source of his apparent strength ends up being his greatest weakness. And this is a very important lesson for all of us. Giants are not as strong and powerful as they seem, and sometimes the shepherd boy has a sling in his pocket. So with that thought in mind, let's jump into another favorite author of mine, Yuval Harari, coincidentally an Israeli historian. So if you didn't, I highly recommend that you read both of his books, Homo sapiens and Homo Deus. And in a nutshell, imagine an island, a desert island in an unknown location in the middle of the ocean. Now drop a monkey and a stupid sapiens there. The monkey will probably not only survive, but thrive. So he'll be just fine. The sapiens may struggle a lot, and definitely a lot, and maybe survive for more than a couple of weeks, but if it's like me, he'll probably despair and die of starvation or poisoning or both. But now drop 1,000 sapiens and 1,000 apes in the same island, and I promise you now that the sapiens will develop an entire society and civilization, and the apes will certainly either be domesticated or totally extinct in no time. Now, apes are very close to us. They not only have physical strength, they can reason, they can solve problems, they can communicate with each other. So what's about sapiens that makes us so different and superior to them? The key to that, and this is the core of the book, is that we have the ability to create stories. I like stories. Everybody likes stories. Humans know how to make stories. Not only communicate factual reality, which is what monkeys and other animals do, like, oh, this is a banana. We humans say, this is a banana from the banana god. So we create those kinds of stories. And even though apes communicate, they usually don't trust outsiders. Now, sapiens, through storytelling, we can coordinate not only with our closest peers, but with strangers and outsiders in large numbers. So just through stories, and what kinds of stories sapiens use to coordinate with large groups? Every kind of story, religion, politics, ideologies, they're all coordination mechanisms. Religion and science, they claim that they are in search for truth, but neither is actually so interested in the truth by itself. Religion wants order, science wants power, and the power, for example, to cure diseases. But science needs religion to some extent because faith is required to fund science. And religion provides faith through storytelling, and it's mutually beneficial relationship. So we cure cancer because we know that humans before God are important and everything else, so it's a very symbiotic combination. And an example of storytelling that you never thought of, so we invented this story about this very abstract thing we call a company. So what is a company? This is something that doesn't exist. It's not physical. There's no physical manifestation in the real world. It's just a freaking story. So even after the founders of the company die, new employees come in. So what is this entity called Mercedes? It's not a person, it's not the factory, it's not the cars, it's just something abstract that exists. You can fire people, hire new people, you can destroy a factory, build up a new factory, and it's still Mercedes. It owns the factories, it employs the workers, it pays the suppliers, it manufactures the cars and trucks, but it's not a person, not a mountain, it's everything and nothing at the same time. It's timeless, but it only requires one judge to sign its dissolution and the entity ceases to exist. It dies, but it was not even living to begin with. So the entity we call a company is technically just a bunch of signed paper. Money is also paper and something that doesn't exist. So the paper by itself is a worthless piece of junk. So we can't eat it, we can't drink it, we can't wear it, so it's useless. But through storytelling, we give value to that piece of paper, exchange value, transactional value. So how long until we cross the line and make, for example, artificial intelligence not only able to own a property, but to make decisions, do transactions, make a profit, keep it to itself, and even negotiate with other AI. So our stories, they culminated in the Industrial Revolution in the last century, and that rendered most of the heavy lifting work obsolete as we replaced them with big factories and machines and robots and equipment, and we have been automating like crazy since then. Tons of jobs in the early 20th century just disappeared, replaced by factories and machines. And it was always common sense to assume that that was okay because sapiens would just graduate to jobs that require more intellect, more cognition, taste. But we freed the machines from our cold desks into the cloud and into our pockets and into our wrists. And we already have digital assistants with fancy names like Siri or Cortana in our pockets, in our computers. And in a sense, we already evolved past sapiens into some form of cyborgs where our intelligence and knowledge is already detached from our brains into some public service. And by the way, a segue here for front-end and UX developers out there, take note. The web UI is a solved problem. Stop talking about curved buttons and borders. Get over it. There are a number of non-web UX that are still uncharted territory. So that's where you should be focusing. I see no one talking about that. But then I digress. Let me go back to our dear Skynet. Consider that machine learning and data sciences have been evolving very fast lately. Google and Facebook certainly have better insights about you than your mother, and probably better than even you know yourself. They know you better. Algorithms now control how you feel and behave about almost everything. You are influenced by everything that's shown to you in your timelines. So you've been brainwashed all this time. Remember that if something is free, you are the product. And in the near future, you will be the product for some artificial intelligence. Exactly 20 years ago, we brute forced our way into the top chess player when the Deep Blue beat Kasparov. And now, this year, we broke the last barrier in table games, beating the most ancient and the most difficult table game of all, which is Go. So AlphaGo versus Lee Sedol, I was watching that, I was very impressed. It goes into history because we not only matched, we were equivalent, we far surpassed playing with humans already. It's a category of its own. AlphaGo was able to beat like 5 of the top Korean players at once. And here's why I say that we programmers are actually Davids, and our slings are as mighty, and we will play a role in the cognitive revolution, the last frontier. And if you think that sounds like science fiction, have you ever heard AI composed songs? So this is a warning to you. So this is computer-aided music composition. Of course, the voices are humans, but it is entirely machine-learned-based music composition. They not only can emulate music that already exists, but compose original songs that never existed. We are doing that in arts, we are doing that in writing, in painting, in music, and everything that we thought would be our last remaining jobs when robots take over everything. So it's impossible to go toe-to-toe against a Goliath. Goliath is this powerful feeling of powerlessness. So this notion that because I am from this far and I'm from this poor land without local opportunities, and because that I'll never thrive, this is powerlessness. So I'd say that we are all Davids, and we have these links in our hands, and we are not wearing heavy, clumsy armor going toe-to-toe against a formidable foe. The world's moving forward, and I am inviting you all to join this ride. It's not just about speaking in English. You know how to do that already, just don't like to do it. We are also not going to patronize you, so not underestimate you wherever you are. And people from big cities, São Paulo, for example, we keep underestimating people from small cities, distant cities, but my experience says that the great minds can come from anywhere, and they do. So I'm talking here to the entirety of the country. And we have to wash away this self-image of the underdog being a bad thing and just keep lamenting our conditions while doing nothing. And when I complain that, for example, imagine that I complained 10 years ago that Brazil sucked because no one liked to use this new tech that I'm trying to push. So everybody sucks because no one likes Rails. I'm gonna go away from this country. So I didn't spend my time whining and lamenting. So I went to work, a lot of patience and consistent work through a long period of time. So that's how you achieve things. Grown-ups don't lament on Twitter. We do the dirt work that no one wants to do. So let's try that again. I've been doing small steps over the last couple of years to make this happen. The goal here is to set an example. We have been changing the tech industry by setting good examples and delivering undeniable results of how we can deal, for example, with agile, new tech, quickly learning new and innovative tools, and also quickly applying them in the real world endeavors. So the industry is following suit. Now we're adding 2 new goals here, making Brazilian programmers to really see with their own eyes and listen with their own ears that we evolved a lot since Joel Santana. And we are every bit as good as the American rock star programmers that we cherish, and at their own turfs. Time and time again, I hear about great Brazilians being hired by overseas companies, and many of them are people just like you and me. And the David is going to give Goliath a true run for its money. Now, it reminds me that about other events. For example, we had many beginnings. In February of 2001, a group of 17 people attended the lodge at Snowbird, a resort at Wasatch Mountains in Utah. The Agile Manifesto was born. In 2001, again, Guy Hurst came up with the idea of doing a Ruby event, the first one. He wasn't able to finish it, so Dave Thomas called Chad Fowler, David Black. They were able to make the small event. It became legend, the first 65 attendees there. In 2007, I myself decided that we needed to have a gathering for the Brazilian Rubyists, so we did reject Conf São Paulo in 2007. We had around 50 attendees, many of whom are still in this industry in leading roles. And the Conf was conceived about a year ago in paper, and I had my doubts that we would be able to pull it off. And actually, the numbers are much more optimistic than I anticipated. So we have, actually, it's not 350, it's like 360. The official number. So we are doing a 360 here. And I would like to give you a really lot of shout out to you guys. You guys rock.